Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar of the OH Outcome Harvesting Community, titled Unlocking the Potential and Utility of Outcome Harvesting. My name is Carmen Wilson Grau. I will be your moderator today. I'm an independent consultant. I'm based in the Netherlands and specialized in outcome harvesting. I'm also one of the OH community facilitators, together with Julius Geers, who couldn't join us today, and Connie Hoytink. Hi, Connie.
Hi everyone. I'm
Um,
Connie.
so we're very excited about our webinar today as it offers a sneak peek into the type of topics and discussions that will take place during our first ever in-person OH event. I will tell more about that at the end of this webinar. Some practical announcements. We kindly would like to ask you to keep yourselves muted during the presentation. You can either keep your camera on and off. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to write them in the chat, and we will address them during the Q&A moment. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available to the OH community members and on our website. If we can go to the next slide, please, Connie.
Yeah. Um, I think, yeah. Sorry.
No worries. So I'm very excited to welcome today Mia Chung and Kanmani Venkateshwaran. I hope I pronounced it correctly, Kanmani. They're both from ICET International, and they will share with us their experience of using outcome harvesting for monitoring a multi-year global program during, during which they discovered its potential and the utility amongst their partners. They will start with a brief introduction to the Zurich Climate Resilience Alliance MERL. They're going to explain how OH is being used for MERL, and then they're going to talk about emergent value of OH and share with us key takeaways. They will also share about how they embedded OH in existing MERL systems, how they conducted OH with networks, and how they leveraged OH within the program. So we have quite a lot to cover, so I won't take up any more time. Hand it over to you, Kanmani.
All right, thank you so much, Carmen. Mia and I are really excited to share more about how we're using outcome harvesting and the value and the potential we see in it. And before we get into the main presentation, we would like to conduct a quick poll on Menti. Next slide, Connie.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you can access the poll via the QR code or on the slide that's on the slide, or you can go to the Menti website and punch in the code. We'd like to know what you've used outcome harvesting for, monitoring, evaluation, or something else. And if you choose other, please do give us some more detail in the chat. So let's take a couple of minutes to fill that out, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just so that you can access the poll and input into it. And we'll come back together again. Oh, okay.
You okay, Kamani?
Oh, it seems like the link leads them to the second poll, which is our mistake. In which case, why don't we just have you all respond to this question in the chat? I'm so sorry for the hiccup in the presentation. But if you can just tell us if you've used it for monitoring or evaluation or something else in the chat very quickly. We can move from there.
Great. I'm seeing some comments from people that people are using, have used it for both, mostly for monitoring, but in evaluation in some instances. Evaluation, multi-project, monitoring and learning. So there's like a great smattering of different ways that people are using.
Monitoring across 11 organizations. So it sounds like there's either a bigger kind of complex monitoring system that someone's working on, learning. Great. So it looks like generally people are kind of using it across the full spectrum of Melon. We have a pretty nice balance of people that are using it for monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Interesting that someone's use for evaluation failed. That's very interesting. And using it as a starting point to develop impact stories. Um, awesome. So generally, it's really good to understand the areas in which you all have applied outcome harvesting. And in this webinar, we're going to talk about how we've applied outcome harvesting for monitoring a complex multi-country and multi-partner program. But before we dive into that, I want to provide some context for who we are, the program in question, and how we arrived at outcome harvesting for monitoring this program. So, Mia and I are both Merle specialists at ISET International. ISET is a Colorado-based nonprofit. We have an office in Vietnam, and Mia has just launched ISET Canada, which is a sister organization to ISET. We work along the entire flow of climate resilience programming. So, we do program design, implementation, evaluation, and learning. And the thread connecting all of these areas of work is our role as a knowledge broker. We connect implementation, science, and decision making. And a key way in which we deliver on this knowledge broker role is through Merle. And to that end, we see Merle as delivering more than an accountability function. Just as some of you noted, beyond progress and tracking progress and impact for accountability, you can use Merle to track learning. And in that respect, we use it to support program strategy, adaptive management, and to build out the broader evidence base for what good resilience programming looks like and how it's enabled. And so this is the approach we take in our role as the Merle lead for the Zurich Climate Resilience Alliance. Connie, next slide. So, the Zurich Climate Resilience Alliance started as the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance in 2013. It's funded by the ZED Zurich Foundation, and it's currently in its third phase of funding, with a vision through 2035. Its uniqueness lies in the fact that it's a long-term multi-country program and that it's self-governed by a network of partners from different sectors. From the country to global levels, teams implement community programs, and they also do, in parallel, they do influence, knowledge, and research activities to achieve systems changes that improve climate resilience practice, policy, and spending. ISET's been the Merle lead for the Alliance since its second phase, which started in 2018, and we started using outcome harvesting in phase 3, so in 2024. Next slide. So we landed on outcome harvesting for several reasons. The Alliance is a complex program with lofty and long-term goals around systems change. And this isn't something that you can track with numeric KPIs or outputs alone. Um, Mia and I and some of our other colleagues at ISET had started to use outcome harvesting and evaluations in the lead up. And we each kind of independently came to this conclusion that it could be useful for meaningfully and credibly monitoring progress on systems change for the Alliance. We know that systems change doesn't result from a single change, right? It's made up of a constellation of changes that ladder up over time. And so outcome harvesting is really useful for capturing all of these individual changes to understand progress, but also for stitching together bigger stories of change over time. And it's also useful for capturing both context and complexity of contribution. And these are both really critical for communicating and understanding change in a multi-country program that operates in very different contexts and along very different change trajectories. Next slide. And I think, yes, there we go. And we kind of, you know, in that respect, like outcome harvesting was really a natural extension of the phase two outcome-based reporting system that we'd had. We'd kind of moved teams from a more output to outcome-based reporting cycle, but what we realized is that we really wanted an approach that captured outcomes more systematically and that enabled much more structured data synthesis and presentation. And one of the really appealing pieces of it as well was that you can kind of slice and dice the data, the outcome harvest data in any number of ways. So you can slice it and dice it in a way that supports you to track change against your own global theory of change, but you can also use it to slice and dice data um, along in an infinite number of ways, along any thematic interest that you or others within your network may have. And so in that respect, it's like its application goes well beyond kind of an accountability and transparency function, and it can really start supporting the identification of emergent trends and themes. And it can start to really shape learning agendas and contribute to kind of applied research interests across a network setting. Next slide. And beyond that, we were also really interested in the fact that outcome harvesting simply levels the playing field. An outcome is an outcome no matter how big or small, and this put all of our country and global teams on equal footing. One outcome doesn't seem bigger than another necessarily. Every change is reported as a change, which really, I think, helped everyone, I think, feel valued within this very, again, kind of networked team. We were also very excited for its data visualization potential. We had spoken with the M&E group from the Danish Institute for Human Rights in the lead up, and some of the visualization work that they were doing really knocked our socks off. It felt like a critical way to ensure that donors and program decision makers understand and take away clear learning on program progress, trends, and gaps from a predominantly qualitative data system that can otherwise seem kind of fuzzy and too nuanced and too complex. And fundamentally, we were also excited about the potential for it to provide a database of stories that people across networks can draw from for different purposes. As I mentioned earlier, you can slice and dice the data in so many different ways. And in that sense, you can just providing access to this database allows people to use it in a lot of different ways and source lots of different kinds of stories from it. Um, and so now I'm actually going to hand it over to Mia, who is going to walk you through the nuts and bolts of our outcome harvesting system and our key takeaways for how you conduct outcome harvesting in a network setting.
Thanks, Kanmani. Connie, could I have the next slide, please? So our Merle system has evolved from how it started. And it started as just a simple progress reporting through a narrative with a couple of numerics. And in some ways, it's similar now. We still have that same progress reporting element. We still have that same numeric element. And as part of our narrative element now, we still also have our outcome harvesting. But part of the evolution has been the tools that we've been using to collect this data, as well as the capacity of our teams to understand what it is that we've been asking for. Because from the start, we've been asking for, not typical information. And so there's been a lot of training that has gone from start till where we are now. That doesn't really show up on this list. We do have a mixed method system. We use primarily lo-fi methods because we have teams all over the world, and we wanted to reduce the barriers to their entry of the data itself. We had previously tried Salesforce, and that didn't work out for our teams as well as what we're using now, which is Excel. And we're using that to do outcome harvesting, as well as collecting our people impacted numbers. One of the powers of using the Excel templates and why we finally really doubled down on that is because it allowed us to connect to Power Query and Power BI, and that allows us to do the data cleaning step, the data aggregation step, in a little bit more of an efficient way. And Power BI allows us to do a visualization that we weren't really able to do before. Next slide, please. Connie, you should be able to press a little play button at the bottom of that video. Yeah, thank you. And so this is just, a quick screen grab of the template that we use. This is the first sheet. This is, again, in Excel. So this gives us the information on some bare instructions. This complements larger guidance that we have for our teams. It also complements a training that we do with them that uses Miro. So here we have the actual sheet. You can see that it's got at the top, and it's got what you might be regularly collecting as outcome harvest data. There's a line for guidance, brief guidance, although it is still fairly long. And you can see that there's like a whole, there's a set of options for people to input in. And those are also drop-down menus. So some of them are drop-down menus, some of them are fill-in. And all of this is sort of meant to assist our visualization capacity, to support our aggregation capacity. And it's also to support our use of, say, Power Query and Power BI, because this helps us clean things in a way that allows us to use our eyes as well, but reduces human error. There are some things that are in here that are specific to the Alliance, like this little bit on the theme tags. These are themes of the Alliance, and these are some of the ways that we wanted to slice and dice. These are also hazard tags. Of course, we wanted to know what hazards our teams are working on, so that was another way that we could slice and dice. You can see that there's different colors. This was sort of intended to help those who are more visual folks versus the narrative versus the writing, so that it would be a little bit easier to see what parts are what. In our trainings, those colors corresponded to the trainings as well. We've been working on this Likert scale on, the significance, and we're still working on that to make it more accessible and understandable to our teams. And here at the end, in these little white bits, those are sort of meant to be our form of sort of fact checking, because we weren't going to be able to validate every single one. And we didn't specifically ask teams to link to evidence. These were opportunities for teams to provide additional evidence, really, so that if we wanted to use them for stories, we could. And also, it allowed our knowledge and comms lead to be able to connect back to some of the learnings that she was interested in. Next slide, please. So we have a 10-step process for how we use outcome harvesting, and this is parallel and separate from some of the processes that we use to clean some of our other data or to use some of our other data. This is for outcome harvesting only. So we have asked teams to report 3 to 5 outcomes annually. And we haven't asked them to report on every single little detail. We wanted just the ones that they thought were the most interesting. We also requested that they report back some things that were of specific interest to the donor, for example, some partnerships and scaling changes, primarily scaling changes. So that's the first step, and we did receive all of those. The next step is to import the data. And so we do a download and we do sort of an initial aggregation and check. And then we put it through Power Query, which we've had a consultant help us develop the code for. And that one helps us aggregate and identify data gaps and clean that data. And it's a really simple, like, binary system where, obviously it doesn't make the decision for us, but it turns red if there's a double. It turns red if there isn't anything, and it gives us a, hey, you should double check and see if there's something going on. And that's been very useful. Next step, please, or next slide.
5 more minutes, Mia, for this section.
Sure. So then we read each outcome. These are sort of typical things that you would normally do. You would read and identify the outcomes that are needing to be removed, combined, or require additional information. We develop 100-word summaries, basically outcome statements. Next slide, please. Then we code it. And so this is also sort of typical practice. We use our theory of change. We look at thematic areas. We look at hazards. We look at the scale of change, other areas of interest, like I mentioned before, that are defined by the Alliance. Then as a team, we use Power BI visualizations. We also work together very closely. We do an aggregate analysis on systems change, cross-alliance trends and patterns, gaps, and areas of learning. And we triangulate this against any numeric impact KPIs that we've collected. Next slide. The next is developing a written analysis of the data. Apologies for the typo there. And then we present the analysis back. And we do this sometimes in person, and we tell the Alliance governance and country teams what's been going on. And we feed the data back in donor reporting and external digital report formats. Next slide. We also work with the Alliance knowledge and comms functions to develop comms stories for impact communications. And we provide access to our network of, basically, we call it a book of outcomes. It's essentially our Power BI. And it allows our teams to visualize in multiple different ways, as well as it has sort of what we call a magazine format, where we've got the outcome harvest, which we've turned into a bit of a narrative, as well as a photo and sort of key facts on the side. Next slide, please. So these are some of the visuals that we get. And as mentioned at the bottom, it's a bit of a continued experimentation for us. Our consultant is really involved in the outcome harvesting process. He did part of the outcome harvest with us this year. So he really understands how that works. And he's had a very strong background in previous sort of visualizations, as well as development work. So he really understands this. Next slide as well. And this is one of our experimentations. This is basically our theory of change. And he's put in, the numbers of outcomes that we've received in each area, and that's helped us do sort of the initial steps of the analysis. And of course, this isn't a quantitative methodology, but this is an internal visualization. This is something that we use internally for our analysis, so we're very clear on that. Next slide, please. So here are some takeaways that we've come to, and just keeping in mind that this has been a long and iterative process, which we're all familiar with as outcome harvest practitioners. From the very start, we wanted to make sure that our process wasn't extractive, but does provide value. So one of the ways that we've been doing this, and it's not just through the outcome harvesting, but through all of our reporting, we've spent a lot of time trying to understand the needs of our users as well as some of the potential needs. So we sit down in bilaterals with our themes and our hazards. They have little teams behind them that are doing that work. We sit down with our country teams if they've said they have an issue with something. We sit down with our country focal point or our organizational focal points for Merle. And, if they have an issue, we try to solve that. The other thing is we try to build flexibility into the system to support emergent needs. Our theory of change is and our reporting system is built around the idea that we want to see essentially if our theory of change is accurate. Our donor wants to know that we've achieved our goals. And between the two, there's a lot of crossover, and we've made sure that our system is able to do that with the questions that we're asking our teams to answer. And sort of the last bit on this slide is providing network access to the outcome database has been something that has really turned around how our teams engage with the data and engage with our reporting. Next slide. And we'll come to this a little bit later, but part of it is just being able to see things, and that changes how we interact, right? And that's one of the benefits of visualizations. All that aside, part of one of the things that we've noticed is that Merle is now considered part of an operational and planning function. It wasn't always. It has grown into that. And so it's part of the actual governance structure, and that allows more continuous learning and feedback loops. And having sort of a dedicated Merle focal point, both at the global as well as organizational levels, supports regular iteration and transparent communication. People are getting the same information from the same people, which really helps to think of Merle beyond an annual exercise. And the last one here is that networks are complex. That's not new for any of us. And that consistency that's engaged with different aspects of the network throughout the year helps us do the sense making in a richer way, helps us do the analysis in a richer way, because we're understanding what the teams are doing in a deeper way as well. So I'm going to pass this back over to Kanmani, where we have a second mentee. So go ahead, Kanmani.
All right. So thank you, Mia. So to break this up a little, and so you get a brief respite from hearing us talk, we'd like to conduct one more poll on Menti, and I hope it actually takes you to the right poll this time. So please go ahead and click into it. Either use the QR code or go to the website and punch the code in. And in this poll, we would like you to tell us how you've used our outcome harvesting data in your own work. We've given you some options. It's a you can pick multiple options in this list, but we don't want you to feel restricted by them. And particularly if you check other, do tell us how you've used outcome harvesting data in the chat. So we'll give you a few minutes to access the poll and provide your inputs. Maybe like 2 or 3 minutes.
And Kanmani, sorry, I might jump in here just because I've accessed the Menti separately to the presentation. I've noticed that people have inputted already. I see some 14 inputs.
Oh, good.
So we've got 10 people or 10 responses on case studies. We have 9 on presentations, slide decks, and webinars. We have 6 on other. And so I'm curious if you are able to type in to our chat in Zoom what the other is. We haven't had anybody use this for video scripts. We've had a couple of people use these for blogs.
Perfect. Thank you, Mia.
Mm-hmm.
You see that someone's used outcome harvesting data to guide joint sense-making sessions, which is very exciting.
Out of curiosity, is that sense making for the outcome harvest itself, or is it sense making for the organization beyond the outcome harvest? Peer evaluations, I see.
And regular reflection. both for harvest and for strategic planning, for midterm reviews and evaluations, sense making reflection sessions, learning decision making for impact stories, going more in depth on specific outcome chains over several years. Excellent. And so we're just going to move this along for the sake of time, but please do continue to input into the chat. I think it's just useful for everyone to see this kind of the emergent uses of outcome harvesting and the inventive ways in which people are using it within this group. Next slide, Connie. So our efforts to socialize outcome harvesting, to open access to the outcomes database and visualize the data means that the outcome harvest data has gained considerable traction within the Alliance. And as a result, we are using the outcome harvest data in a lot of ways beyond its accountability and transparency function. I think one of its most rewarding uses is to celebrate success. Outcome harvesting has allowed us to capture stories of success and present those back to the Alliance. And we really do make it a point to ensure cross-Alliance representation in our compilation of the stories. And seeing these stories has built a real sense of pride among the teams and a shared story of success. Some teams are actually using these stories to develop their own impact briefs and to illustrate the success of their programs and pilots to their own audiences. We are also using the stories to facilitate internal learning. The Alliance is holding a global learning event, which brings together Alliance teams in person to share knowledge and learning from each other. This is actually happening next week. And we are using the outcome harvest to shape a session on systems change, basically what it looks like, its component parts, and so on. And this kind of harkens back to one of the comments we got in the chat about how, outcome harvesting really supports you to go more in depth on a specific outcome chain, and you can kind of do this from a systems change perspective. And the use of Merle has also grown as the vastness of the knowledge we possess has become clear. As Mia said, we used to not really, Merle wasn't quite so integrated in the planning and the operations of the Alliance. It was seen more kind of as an annual exercise, and that's really changed over time. I mean, we've been doing Merle since 2018 for the Alliance, so we know a ton about what the Alliance teams do. Their progress, their impact, how they work, and so on. And so as a result, we've become our key reference for Alliance reflection and for decision making. And we've been able to provide recommendations for even shaping the next phase of the Alliance program. And these recommendations are very much backed by the outcome harvest data and the visualizations that we're able to produce. And we are also increasingly receiving knowledge requests from our donor and other corners of the Alliance. We're sourcing case studies from the Outcome Harvest to support the development of research and policy products on financing for locally led adaptation. We are also responding to requests from our donor to gain a deeper understanding into our program. So we've really relied very heavily on the Outcome Harvest to provide a nuanced take on the sustainability of our programs, how they're working to achieve impact at scale, and so on. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, all good. There's one before this one.
There's a delay. Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. There we go. Perfect. And the expanding use of the outcome harvest really goes hand in hand with the growing value that people see in it. Most excitingly, we're actually seeing growing buy-in into outcome harvesting from our country teams. As you all know, annual reporting processes often draw a collective groan from teams. It's a necessary evil, it is not fun, and it is often perceived as extractive. And so outcome harvesting, when we introduced it, was met with some dread and skepticism from our teams. It was a new methodology and framework, and thus a new mountain to climb. And the style of reporting felt really heavy. But in practice, teams actually really like it, and they've found it really useful to advance their thinking, their strategy, and their program profile. And so we have all of these points on this slide, but we're actually going to come back to them in the next slide. So Connie, the next slide.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yep. Um, and so here's an example from one of our country teams. This team found that outcome harvesting allowed them to identify outcomes, including unexpected or unplanned outcomes that are really difficult to capture in traditional reporting systems. They also really valued being able to annually consolidate their program achievements. And this has directly supported them to reflect on their systems change strategy and thinking and their theory of change. And they've also been able to use this narrative of success to talk with local government stakeholders. They've been able to present the success of their work, what they're doing, how they're contributing to it, and the significance. And that's been really valuable in building partnerships and kind of growing their own profile. And the like I have like I want to emphasize that the growing value and use of outcome harvesting within the Alliance hasn't happened entirely organically. We had hoped, Mia and I, that the system would deliver on at least some of these aspects. And so we built and socialized the system to really enable flexible and multiple uses. And I think embedding that flexibility into the system and having people actually use the system and see what it can produce has really kind of unlocked this potential. And so I'm going to hand the podium back to Mia to talk about our key takeaways for designing and embedding outcome harvesting to support these multitude of uses.
You're muted, Mia. Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Kanmani, and thanks for the next slide, Connie. So I think we've hinted at this throughout, and I'm sure that you all know this already. I don't think this is necessarily a new takeaway, but good outcome harvesting comes with a learning curve. And so this needs to be reflected in the way that you set up the guidance and the training processes. And I think this is just beyond this is beyond, making sure that everybody has the right thing. It's also thinking about the timing, and what ideas need to be in place before we can start doing outcome harvesting. And I'm sure that for when we've started outcome harvesting, if we can reach back into our memory on that, it involved sort of a lot of shifting the way that we thought about ideas. One of the wonderful things about outcome harvesting is that it's a story essentially. But it does require thinking about that story or what makes a story in a different kind of a way. And that ties into this next idea that outcome harvesting requires a different reporting culture. And so part of all of this, and we've hinted at this as well throughout our presentation, is that we started our teams off not with the outcome harvest, but with other things. We brought our teams up to speed on what it meant to be reporting on impact, not just the outputs that you've done and the fact that you have done them. We had our teams really learn what it meant to think in terms of systems, and not just, the activities that they're doing or think about themselves individually. So we've had the opportunity for long-term engagement, as from both our teams as well as us as the Merle analysts, and that's helped quite significantly. Next slide, please. And I alluded to this earlier as well, which is that seeing is believing. When people can engage with the data in a meaningful way, it gives them a different perspective. And so we've done this not just through the Power BI visualizations or that little package of visualizations. We've done interactive trainings. We've done this through Miro, where people can dive in and right away and start seeing what their outcomes look like. That's helped build ownership and excitement. It's also helped strengthen connections between the Merle team and the country teams. We've had feedback from the Merle team saying that they felt really proud because they hadn't really thought about their achievements in this way, got really excited that people at the global level got excited for them, and really liked that back and forth that they haven't gotten previously. As I mentioned, as we've mentioned before, Kamani and I, that the data visualization supports a new and robust way of illustrating some of the changes that we've been seeing. And that's helped us both from an analytical perspective, but also for the teams to see what's going on across the alliance. We use the outcome harvest for impact validation. We use this to validate the numbers that we've received. We use the outcome harvest to highlight stories and celebrate success internally. And this is being done, for example, at our global learning event next week, and it's forming part of our icebreaker for our teams. And this is sort of based on that outcome harvest as well. And finally, the infrastructure has been set up to allow a shared use and transparency. Power BI is a little bit challenging, but we've been working to ensure that it's open to those who will use that data. We have everything on SharePoint, all of our trainings, all of other people's trainings too. All of it is up there for people to learn from, and we use teams who have volunteered to do worked examples for us. In terms of leveraging outcome harvesting, really, we want to focus on the user. We've collaboratively developed the templates, guidance, and trainings, and we continue to iterate. We think about any time a team has a concern or an access issue and try to resolve that. And so we have supported training people to shift from the outcome to output or the output to outcome reporting. People feel, I think, with the longer relationship, people are feeling trusting and open to bilateral conversations. And they recognize that there's ongoing training on content and that they're driving that content. And then the other thing here is that we don't necessarily think having a bigger team is better, at least at the Merle governance level. We have a very tightly knit Agile Merle team. We've worked together for a very long time. We finish each other's sentences. We collaborate very well. And we've found that to be, we're quite privileged to have that opportunity, but also that it is very effective. We don't have the fragmentation that's needed or that appears when you need to pass back and forth from broader swaths of your team. And this does support a sustained long-term view for analysis. Most of us are the same people that have read all of the progress reporting from day one. I think Kanmani has the memory of all of these reports in her brain. And so having that is, invaluable. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to the Q&A session. And so we are open to questions from anyone, whether written in the chat or elsewise. And I think it'll be Carmen that's facilitating that.
Yes, thank you, Mia and Kanmani. That was very interesting, eye-opening. I liked how you post some of the usefulness and value of OH, slice and dicing the data, for example, and I think that's really spot on. Are there any questions? There weren't any questions in the chat. I have some questions on my own, but I want to give first others the opportunity to pose their questions. You can raise your hand or unmute. Okay, Lydia Espinosa is asking, how will you initiate with outcome harvesting in a new project?
Kanmani, you want to take that or do you want me to?
Sure. So I think that's, with the Zurich work that we have done, we've kind of, we've been privileged to be a part of a much longer term kind of reporting Merle journey, if and so we've kind of been able to build up. We kind of first went from the outputs to outcome-based reporting transition and then kind of built outcome harvesting. So it felt like a very natural extension of what we were doing in phase two for the Alliance. I think in terms of initiating outcome harvesting in a new project, I think the biggest thing is making sure that the teams are prepared to kind of do that more outcome-based reporting because it is such a stark shift. And I think it's also about when you build a system, build it iteratively so people understand or they're kind of on this journey with you to understand the value of it. There's a shared understanding of how it's going to be used and why we're using outcome harvesting. And I think it's a lot about providing ongoing one-on-one support to the degree that you can. We have put a lot of time and effort into developing guidance materials, running regional webinars, and also running one-on-one outcome harvesting workshops with the teams to really build the capacity. And it's not one and done. Um, we started this kind of in year one, some teams signed up for it. And then in year two, a lot of teams came back for it again, and new teams signed up for it. So it's it really does require, I think, sustained engagement and interaction. Mia, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else in there.
I think the other thing that I have to add in here is not different from what Ganmani is saying, but recognizing that a lot of projects have shorter time windows.
Mhm.
Um, I think part of what we're saying is that it might not work to launch outcome harvesting in your first year. You might want to do something differently and build up to it so that you're doing outcome harvesting by your second or third year if you have a longer term project like that. If you have a very short term project, then of course you're going to need to launch it right away, but maybe outcome harvesting isn't the way to go there unless you're maybe doing an evaluation. But if you're looking for monitoring, that might be too much to land onto the project if they've never done this kind of reporting that is outcomes based before.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Jay so we can hear from participants directly. Jay, I saw you had a question in the chat. You can unmute.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating to see how the Power BI piece got put together. So are you guys still actively relying on consultants? How much can you do as a team and how much can you push out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our consultant is part of our team. So, as I mentioned, that he's done part of the outcome harvest with us for the Alliance as well. So, um, he's in some ways internal, but also a little bit external. Over time, what because this is an iterative process, the first year was quite intensive to try and figure out exactly what we needed and how it needed to look. The second one has been sort of lower touch. A lot of it now runs by itself. He needed to check the code to make sure it was still okay, and that it was still connecting properly. He checked with us to see if there were some new capacities that we might want and added those in. The part that's requiring a bit more consistent touch that we haven't had, the time to learn ourselves is doing the visualization side of things. So the Power Query side is where he's done a lot of the coding that is starting to run itself with light touches from him. The Power BI is where it's taking a bit more effort because if we want a different slice and dice, it's possible for us to do it, but we haven't learned it yet. He does offer trainings, and he will be, offering trainings for our team, and for anyone who is interested externally as well, on, how to use Power BI for this. And for the moment, it's still something that is primarily driven by the consultant because of the specialized knowledge that it requires.
Yeah, and having, I think, consistent engagement from our consultant has also made experimentation so much more possible. I understand that this might not be within the realm of, in a short-term program time frame or um, if there are constrained budgets. So which is why I think investing in this makes a lot of sense if you have a long-term program or if you're using it for monitoring at a portfolio or at an organizational level. I think building that relationship and having that kind of technical piece just there continuously is really useful.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll hand it over to Elma, who also had a question in the chat. Go ahead.
Hi, hi, thank you. So my question is, does the outcome harvesting take care of all your Merle needs? I mean, do you also go have traditional evaluations, look at evaluation questions where you need specific information that won't necessarily come from outcome harvesting, and how do you combine that?
So we do have impact KPIs that the donor expects us to report on. That for the Alliance, it is a people impacted number. And we do still ask for progress reporting because there's a lot that happens that has not reached the outcome level yet. And I think for teams who are doing so much, not feeling like they have enough to report is a bit of a panic for them, right? So you do need to give them space to tell you what activities and everything that everything that they've done that doesn't quite meet the outcome harvesting requirements. And I also think that leads to a much better quality of the outcome harvest because that way, you're not getting a bunch of outputs that are reported as outcomes, and you have to clean the data a lot less. Um, so it is, as Mia noted earlier, it is very much a mixed methods system, but what we are seeing is growing use on our end and growing reliance on the outcome harvest, and especially because I think the program has reached a point where teams are really producing a lot of outcomes that we are able to meet a lot of the reporting and knowledge needs that are coming out of the Alliance through the outcome harvest. Mia, anything else?
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. What Kanmani is sort of hinting at is we have the progress reporting that we've been collecting. We're increasingly less reliant on it, to a point where now we're wondering if we need it anymore. But if we hadn't had it to begin with, I don't think it would have worked because it does help contextualize. It gives teams a place where they think they can put all the interesting things they've done. And it gave teams a chance to understand that we were just interested in the interesting things they'd done, not that they'd met their goals or something like that. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Noor, you want to ask your question?
Sorry, yes, I'm somewhere a little bit loud, I hope you can hear me. No, thanks so much for the presentation from our side. So, from ICMPD, we're an international organization, so we obviously have teams implementing projects sort of around the world. So our question was, we'd like to, of course, introduce outcomes harvesting a little bit more systematically, especially for monitoring. We've also actually been consulting the Danish Institute of Human Rights, who you mentioned already. But our main concern is about overburdening our colleagues who still very much have to complete progress reports, report in a more sort of traditional indicator sense back to the donors. So we'd just like to kind of, hear from you about your experience in that and how you sort of balance both.
I think it is a balancing act that we are still trying to maintain in a lot of respects. As we said, the advantage is that, every year we have found ways to strip down the progress reporting further. We've become very, very streamlined, I think, in what we're asking for and why. So we have the impact KPI, which we need a very strong paper trail for and to make sure people are reporting into very well, because that is the indicator that our donor is very, very interested in. And that is the indicator that, that reports into the key target that we have for the program, which is to impact 70 million people by 2035. And so I think where the utility of outcome harvesting has really been in that is to use it as a way, like not only to get the kinds of impact stories and to show the value of qualitative data, the nuance and richness that it brings, but also using it as a way to really validate the the impact numbers that people are reporting. Because if they are reporting big numbers, then there needs to be a story or a set of stories within the outcome harvest that really explain, you know, where that number comes from, how it was achieved, and the significance of it, and why they think they can report as many people as they did, impacted as they did. So, um, I think it's been one of the advantages of the system we've set up. And I think with the outcome harvesting, because now teams are, and again, it wasn't always like this. Like this has been like the growing value that teams have seen it over time, because they are finding ways to use it. It's not just an extractive reporting methodology, because they're finding ways to use it in their own programs. The willingness to report into it and report into it well has really grown over time.
I think the other thing there is also that we work really closely with the organizational Merle focal points. So we do global work, but and we do closely work with the country teams. But there is also somebody in between that's helping us with that process. And that person leads the process for the organization. And I know that for each organization, they do slightly different things. And this is, to help streamline their own process in the way that you're talking about, Nor, where you don't want to be overburdening the teams. So some teams have their Merle person collect everything. They essentially do sort of the initial data gathering. Maybe they're the ones that are making the notes in their outcome harvest journals or logs or whatever. And they bring it back to their teams and say, hey, was this true? We have only asked for 3 to 5 outcomes as a way to sort of limit and not burden the teams that much. And part of the training has always been, if you sit down with us, we will help you write this. And then you are going to come away with a few more ideas for what you've got. Part of our system too has been trying to make it seem as simple as possible, in bits that might seem useful to them later. And I think that's been part of the team seeing that additional use. They're inputting this data and it feels simple to them because they're already thinking about their successes or the things that they have done in that way. So even though we've trained teams on the outcome harvesting method, they don't really need to know the method that much. They just need to know sort of the distinction between what is an evidence and what is not an evidence to change. And they've needed to broaden their thinking about who can contribute and what that looks like. But everything else is, how they already think about the work. And most of our teams lean on the side of being conservative because they are quite used to having lots of different donors to report to and the like. So it's sort of something that's been all working together.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. We still have questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I want to thank Kanmani and Mia again for this incredibly useful presentation. I think we had a good audience, very engaging, and we learned a lot. So here are Kanmani's and Mia's email if you want to reach out for follow-up questions. And if we go to the last slide, Connie, please. Just want to remind everyone of our upcoming first ever in-person outcome harvesting community practitioners gathering. So this was kind of like a teaser for this event. During this gathering, we will have presentations like the one we just heard from Kanmani and Mia. We will have more time for questions and discussions. So if you're still interested in joining, registrations are open until mid-June. It's going to be July 7th to July 9th in Arusha, Tanzania, and you can visit our website for further details, and we will also keep sending information through the community. We will share the recording from today's webinar, and I want to thank you all for a very engaging webinar, and see you next time.